Hello and welcome to Art and Self. I'm Cindy Ingram, your host and the founder of Art Class Curator, the Curated Connections Library, and the Art and Self Connection Circle. This is a podcast where we experience the range and depth of what it means to be human, seen through our connections and conversations about works of art. These art conversations are here to show you that art is here for you as a catalyst, a challenger, a coach, and a comfort. Before we get started, take a moment to fill up your lungs with a deep breath. Connect with your body and your mind and your spirit, and get ready to discover what art has to show you. All right, I am so excited to welcome to the Art and Self podcast, Bryna Talamantez. Hello, Bryna.
Hello.
This is my very first interview for our brand new format, which I have already introduced in another episode. But what we're going to do is pick a work of art related to Bryna's work and her life and have a conversation about it. So before we get started on that, Bryna, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Bryna, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in Plano, Texas. I specialize in working with kids, specifically who are navigating grief, whether that's traditional death loss or divorce, life transitions, moving, changing of schools, change of friendship groups, things like that. Anxiety, ADHD, depressive symptoms. I do a lot of play therapy. I'm on the floor of my office more often than I'm in my chair. Um, just enjoying working with kids and teens and with young adults and adults too.
Awesome. And what made you want to specialize in this type of therapy?
Yeah, so I always knew I wanted to help people. My mom really instilled helping, as that's just what we do. We help others. And I went into college as a psychology major, knowing I wanted to help people. I didn't quite know in what capacity yet. I danced most of my life until I had hip surgery a couple years
Mm.
ago and thought I would go that route of dance therapy and working with others through dance and expression. Then my mom died when I was in college. So my dad died when I was 9. My grandmother died when I was 14, and then my mom died unexpectedly when I was a sophomore at SMU. And it was after that that I realized I have been given this journey so that I can help people specifically who are grieving. And not because that makes me an expert on grief, because I will never say I'm an expert on anything. We're always learning and changing, and theories adapt and change, and ways that we understand things and interpret things always change. But I take a lot of time to read about grief and to know about grief through books, but also sitting with others in their experience. So I have the experience going in. I'm never going to tell a kid or a person sitting across from me, I know exactly how you feel, because that is one of the most unhelpful things you can ever say. But I will look at some of my teens, especially, and go, okay, I get it. I understand where you're coming from. Tell me more about your experience. I want to know about you. And kids and teens, especially now, are very aware of who they trust and who they don't, and the people who get it and the people who don't. And if I can authentically look at them and go, yeah, that really stinks. I'm really sorry. That's a tough day. I've had days that feel similar to that, but tell me more about yours. So it's important for them to know who's sitting across from them. And that's why I do what I do. I worked at a nonprofit for a while that provides free grief support groups for kids, teens, and their families after someone has died. And my mom and I actually went to that group for 5 years after my dad died. So this just I talk about death all day. And um, some people look at me, they're like, how do you do that? I'm like, because it's not all bad. We talk about feelings and we talk about coping skills and how to navigate tough days. And some days are light and they're like, man, I had a good day. We celebrate in those good days. Okay, what made today great? Tell me more about that. So that's why I chose to do what I do now.
Awesome. And you also, before we get started on the art, you also have a new podcast coming out. And so I want to make sure we talk about that a little bit too, so people can have that in their head while we're talking. What's your podcast
Yeah,
about?
absolutely. It's called What the Feels. It launched on October 5th or 6th. And we are going to talk about, kind of similar to your podcast, but we're going to talk about movies, books, TV shows, how they relate to mental health things, how things that they maybe do well when it comes to mental health, maybe things that they could do a little bit better. different ways that society perceives things like grief and anxiety, depression, things like that. The first episode was Inside Out. So we all got a baseline of some feelings and what are feelings and how are they living in our brain and how do they affect us on a daily basis. And then the Coco episode will release on October 19th. And then for November, we're going to specifically be talking about grief movies for National Child Grief Awareness Month.
Excellent. So I will put links to all of this stuff into our show notes. And okay, so what we're going to do is for each guest, I am going to either pick a work of art. If I know for sure that's the work of art, I'll pick it. But for Bryna, she actually has a background in art history. You have an art history degree or a minor?
I have a minor. Yeah. It was my fallback plan.
It cracks me up that art history is the fallback plan. I think it's usually people have a fallback plan from the art history, but I love that.
Yeah.
So, and Bryna was actually the first one in my line of sight after I had the idea for this podcast. So that's why she's first. I literally had the idea like the night before, and then I met her for the first time in the morning at a networking event here in Dallas area, and I was like, oh, she's perfect. So it was great.
We were like, let's do it.
Yes. And then she said she had an art history background. I was like, oh, good. So you're experienced in this. Okay. So but for Bryna, I picked 4 works of art. And I am going to show them to her live here, and she is going to pick one. And I go through in my head I have this procedure that if you're a longtime listener, you might know this already from my work with Art Class Curator, is the 4 C's. Is the artwork connected? Is it complex? Is it communicative? And is it captivating? So I've made sure it meets those first 3 C's. All 4 of these options are captivating to me, but we want to find out what's captivating to Bryna. So I'm going to put them up on the screen one at a time. And I want you to not like intellectually look at them, but I want you to just feel into them and see which one like really makes you, gives you that little spark of energy that makes you want to keep looking. So that's what we're looking for. And then I've made sure that there's stuff we can talk about with each one. I've checked. I have my favorite, but I want to see what yours is. All right, so let's share my screen. So excuse me, podcast listeners, but I probably won't edit this out because I'm trying to work on my perfectionism. And y'all can handle listening to me share my screen. Okay. All right, can you see these, Bryna?
Yes.
Okay, and I will put these, I'll probably link all 4 of them in the show notes if you're curious what we're looking at. All right, so this is our first option. This is called There Is a Thread You Follow by Linda McCabe. And then we have our second option here. I don't know the title for this one, but it's by Kelsey Loomer.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Melancholy by Albert Georgi.
Oh, wow.
Do not know if I'm saying that last name right, but it's probably close enough. And then we have Separation by Edvard Munch.
Oh.
Which one spoke to you?
Goodness. It's between the first one and this one.
Okay. I'll show you both again.
Yeah. I think there's so much that we could talk about for either one, but I've been doing so much, I don't know, bright colors have been my thing recently. So although I love Munch and I love this piece and there's so much we can talk about that separation, but there's something about the first one.
Awesome.
That's making me go, I want to look at
This
you
is
more.
the one I wanted you to choose.
Oh, good. Look at us.
So win-win. That's why it's first. I was like, I want it to be the first one you see. Okay. Yeah. I won't always do that. Now I'm like future guests might be like, okay. Beautiful. And I threw in the last one because I know you said you liked Impressionist, and Munch's not Impressionist, but I was like, oh, let's put a little older one in there. Yeah. Too, but let's see. I'm going to make this bigger so we can see it bigger. All right. All right, so we're going to start our discussion. So, Bryna, I would love you to just tell us what drew you to it first. You mentioned the colors, but what else are you noticing?
Yeah. So obviously the colors, there's so many different elements to this. There's the colors, there's the woman being vulnerable, some butterflies, the bright flowers. I see there's text.
Mhm.
Um, and I think one thing that kind of drew me to this one, there is a really great children's book called The Invisible String by Patrice Karst. And she's written a couple of them now. It started with The Invisible String. Then during COVID, she wrote the book called The Invisible Web. And it talks about how even when we're not with our people, whether our people are alive or whether they have died, we have these invisible strings that connect them. So them to us. And so I use that a lot with kids that are having some separation anxiety at school, whether we're talking about our person who has died. And so there was just something about the theme of a thread. I was like, wow, and that we're all interconnected in that way. And I think that that's so cool.
Awesome. Okay. Let's describe it for our listeners. So we're going to put the image on the show notes, obviously, but if you're driving, don't
Yeah,
don't try to
don't
look
look,
at
please.
it.
Let's drive safe.
Yeah. Wait till you're home. But so let's describe it. So we have a woman in the center. She's kind of it's more like a bulbous shape of her body, kind of like a vase. She's almost has a vase shape to her body. There's no
Mhm,
like
mhm,
distinct arms or legs. And she's red and orange and yellow, and there's sort of flames kind of coming up from the bottom, almost like her legs. Whether
mhm,
they're flames or not, that's just they flame looking things.
mhm,
Um, on her chest, it's like a darker shade of red, whether it's a hole, whether it's her heart. We can talk about what that might mean.
mhm.
On her, she has some like a swirl on her head, and she has like a flower looking thing on her neck. You want to keep going with the description? I'm just
Yeah,
sorry, just
so then we have this beautiful kind of pinkish purple flower kind of blocking our view of her like belly, abdomen area. We have there are blue background with some stars behind her. There's some, I think you mentioned already, the green and yellow kind of swirls around her. There's several different butterflies, and what I kind of like is that each one of them is kind of drawn differently. Some have more
mhm,
detail, some are more simple, like as if a kid drew them, which I think is really cool. And then we've got some things at the bottom that look like plants. Those long, kind of tall, brown top things you find like near water.
oh,
I can't
cattails.
think of, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of the cattails at the bottom. There's some other shapes and kind of a moon at the bottom. So it feels very like universal. Like,
Mhm,
is that the word is that maybe not the right word, but like it's of another world, kind of.
mhm.
It has
Ethereal.
this, yeah, thank you. Like this dark contrasted with the lightness of her body, and it's really
Yeah.
cool. It makes her really stand out a lot.
Yeah, it really does. And then the thread that Brenna mentioned is
Oh yeah.
it's there's an actual thread on there. Um, glued, I don't know if it's glued, but it's kind of hanging down. But then there's this yellow, curvy, not zigzag, it's not sharp, but like, that zigzaggy shape all the way through. And it kind of starts up in the sky, goes behind her head, and then it goes behind her neck, and then it kind of loops around her neck and then goes through the front of her body all the way down and then kind of loops around that flower that Brenna mentioned as well. And along
Mhm.
that thread is that text. And I'm going to read that text for y'all so you can hear it. It's hard to see on the picture. It says, there is a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and, well, I messed up. And you suffer. Sorry, that was my own typo, not the painting's typo. And you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread.
Mm.
And then there's also, yeah, like a lot of little dots and patterns and things throughout, very bold. Oh, and then she has a flower on her chest as well, like a
Yes.
white. Is that, are those lotus flowers or not? Maybe not.
They They look like them.
kind of. Yeah, they're kind of lotus flowery.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and there's some galaxy looking things in the sky. I think we got it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what part of the painting is really drawing you in right now?
There's something about the middle. There's something about that white lotus
Hmm.
flower. There's something about that purple, and probably the way it's positioned, that's where the artist wants us to go with it. But just focusing on her kind of as a whole and these things that are standing out that are in front of her. Like I kind of lose the background a little bit,
Hmm.
but it's her and it's these two flowers and like one being kind of placed towards her heart. Um, that's just very intriguing to me.
Yeah. So what do you think the artist could be trying to say there with that placement of the
Yeah,
flower?
I think one of the, I mean, I think with her heart, it's just like, here's this beautiful thing that's growing inside of
Mm,
her. And I think that, like, if you put that kind of with the text of like, it's almost, this is where her passion is. And so she has this thread that she's following, but this flower represents this passion and this growing passion. The white one isn't quite as big as the purpley pink one. And so it's like this passion is growing. It's getting
mm,
bigger and it's not as big, but I'm sure it will be. And it's, I mean, I don't think the purple flower is attached to her. I think that's maybe
yeah.
this is an idea or this is something that's growing, but that the white flower is a part of her.
Yeah,
And
it's interesting to me. Like it looks like that white flower is coming, that the center part of her is more it's darker and it looks
mhm,
almost like a void. It almost like the red and yellow and orange of her whole body, it looks like, it could be her skin, but in that central part of her body, it looks almost hollow or
mhm, mhm,
it's darker on the inside and it's like there might be a void there, but then there's life growing out
mhm,
from it.
right,
And I might be being influenced by the other artwork that I showed you, which is
right,
Melancholy,
right,
because it's a sculpture that has like the bronze figure, but then the whole torso is
mhm,
hollow, and you can see
right.
through it. So I'm probably being influenced by that as well. But
Yeah, I think definitely like growth, something filling her up,
mhm.
something that's bringing her joy and passion in some way.
And that
But
flower
that's
too feels very precious, like
hmm
and protected in that space. Like that hollow area could be like it's like little incubator.
yeah,
When I'm coming up with a new idea, like this podcast, for example, I just had the idea a few weeks ago, like how to do it, but this has been in my head for a good year and a half of like, how do I know what I want this to be, but I don't
right,
know what it's going to look like yet. And so I was just kind of like nurturing this little thing and protecting it and making sure it's safe and that, letting it grow on its own and until it's ready to like fully go out into the world. So I
right.
almost feel like that space is keeping it um,
Protected.
protected while it starts to grow.
Yeah, and it's maybe this is my own bias coming out a little bit, but it's almost as if like she wants to hold it to herself for just a little longer
Mm,
because it is precious and keeping it protected from criticism, keeping it protected from anybody else's opinions. Like this
mm,
is hers, it's her beautiful thought or idea or thing that she wants to keep precious to her.
yeah,
And so it's in that hollowed space or incubator like space or protected area so that it's hers and she reminds herself daily like this is mine, this is what I want to do.
yeah. I really resonate with that.
Hmm.
So, what do you
Yeah.
think about the big flower? What
I
is
don't
that?
know. I don't know what exactly to think about the big flower just yet. I think I mean, it's put in the center along with this white one for a reason. I don't think it's a part of her. I think
Hmm.
it's in front of her. And so is it a previous idea or something that she did? Is it a previous protected flower that she had that she's now planted and seen grown? Because these two flowers are similar. They may not be the same color, but the shape, they look the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it's something along those lines of maybe it's something previous that she's watched grow and now she has this new thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also agreeing. Like, I can't quite place
Mhm.
what that flower is about just yet.
Right.
Like, is
And
it
I
the same? Is it different? What is its purpose? And I feel like we might eventually like have some other ideas on that as we
when I think
show
it's
the
interesting
rest.
that the yellow wavy line that has the text goes through that white
Mm-hmm.
flower and then kind of wraps, maybe not around, but like it wraps through
Yeah,
that purple flower. So like they're connected, but not, it's not like here's this straight line. It's like they're woven kind of together in this way.
right. Yeah, I didn't notice that yellow thread doesn't go around it. It goes like almost under the flower, between the flower and the leaf, maybe.
Mhm.
And then it made me think, oh, is it going through her ever? And then at her neck, it might, I'm wondering if it's actually going through her instead of behind her, like I originally
Mm.
said.
Hmm.
It's kind of hard to tell.
Right. And that's where it changes. It becomes less solid, less filled,
Yeah.
excuse me, as it like either passes through or goes behind her. It's like it's coming from the sky. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's solid. Once it hits her, it's more open,
Yeah.
has less color. And then it goes to the ground, what we assume is the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely assume because that there's, that plant life. Hmm. Okay. The flower. But we will continue to think. I like the idea
Yeah.
that it could be something that she has already planted and seen grown.
Hmm.
Um, And then my art, my like art analysis, art history brain or like artist brain is like, oh, well, obviously the purple flower is mimicking the purple that's in the butterflies in the background. So it's kind of creating cohesion, which is
Right.
perhaps
Which
like
is
that
not,
could be it
yeah,
too.
right. It's not, that's not wrong.
Yeah. It's like it could be just that's what she was doing. And the same thing with the solid to opaque. It's like, well, yeah, because we wanted to see the person. But I
Right.
love that, and what could have been it could have been just a choice from the artist to make a like more pleasing composition or, to make it look more whole and done. We can still find meaning in it, even if there might not have originally been any meaning in it. And that's what's so powerful
Right.
to me about looking at art is, whatever happens once it leaves that artist's hands, like we can take with it whatever we
Right. And
want
that
to.
it can mean different things to different
Yeah.
people.
So I want to talk about the text and how it fits in with the image. So tell me about what you're feeling about the text that's on the painting.
Lots of feelings about the text.
Oh, okay.
Um, I'm trying to figure out where the words are. I think that it's sometimes hard for us to explain to others why we do what we do and what draws us to do what we do. I think that, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, there's something, I mean, I talk about death a majority of the
Hmm.
day, and most people may look at me and go, well, why do you do that? And part of me is like, well, because there's 1 in 16 kids that, and that's the before COVID number, that either lose a parent or sibling before the age of 18. They die
Mm.
before they turn 18. And so that's the why. It it's like we do these things because somebody needs to. And we want to do these things without judgment. We want to do these things without constantly explaining why we do what we do. We do what we do because we want to. and
Mm.
because we love it. And I think even when I was 10 and wanted to dance either on Broadway or with the Rockettes, you know, you get a why. And you're like, because I want to. That's why. And I think our society's maybe getting a little less so. But I remember when I was a kid, it was like, you need something that's stable. You need
Mm-hmm.
something that you're going to go to work 9 to 5 and you're going to get your paycheck and you know how much that paycheck is. And that can be so limiting. Once I was able to kind of break out of that mindset of, I mean, because being a therapist sometimes is not like the most stable thing either, especially if you
Yeah.
don't take insurance, which I don't. But there's some, I got sick this summer and I had to take a week off and it took a little bit to recover like financially from that, but I'm not going to change jobs because there was a couple hard weeks that, we couldn't go to Chipotle all the time, but we do what we do because we love it. And I think that that makes us better at what we do is because we love it. And when we get out of this mindset that work has to be this 9 to 5, 40-hour a week, paycheck with benefits life, it opens us up to so many opportunities. It opens us up to, I think, being able to do things that could be harder, like working moms. Okay, we maybe not work 9 to 5, but we have the ability to do something we love while also being with kids. And it doesn't matter what we choose to do. It's the way that feels good to us. And so I think, I don't know, that's been an ongoing conversation in my own brain, I think, of I didn't share my own podcast idea with a lot of people because I was like, is this silly? Is this a weird idea? Is this something I'm gonna receive judgment for, or people having to explain why I do these things? But then once I did it, I was like, well, here's this thing I did because I wanted to, and because I think we need to have conversations around mental health and how it's portrayed in the media that we consume, and grief, especially because again, I talk about death all day. Um, but yeah, I think that I'm getting a lot of those themes kind of
Yeah.
from the text. And I think once it hits that tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the universal or the of the thread. And I think that there are a lot of things that come up. There are deaths that happen. There are more tragedies that happen. We might revamp what we do. I think that, I mean, every once in a while, I'm like, okay, well, if one more tragedy happens, will I still be able to do this? And I
Mm.
think at the end of the day, with enough help, sure. We have to take care of ourselves too, because this is still why we do what we do, is because we can sit in this space and we can create art and do things that we love. We don't let go of that universal thread of, for me, is helping others. So maybe helping others, if more things happen and get to be too much, maybe that shifts. But the overall theme is that I'm helping others.
Yeah.
So lots of
Oh,
things.
yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many things I want
Lots of things
to.
packed in there.
What part of what you just said do I want to
I
comment on?
know.
And the answer is all the parts. So,
Right.
I love what you said about just wanting to. I don't think I got that message until very recently. I remember exactly where I was. I was in it was like a business mastermind meeting, and someone was just maybe, I mean, I was in that group like 2 years ago, and someone in the group was like, I'm doing this because I want to. And I forget her quote. I wrote it down somewhere. I'm sure it's on a scrap of paper somewhere in my life, but it's like, wanting to is reason enough.
Mhm.
And, that for some reason that felt
Yeah.
very revolutionary. And
Wait,
even
I'm
with my,
writing that down.
yeah, yeah, it's just, it's fine. And like, ever since that moment, I like when my children are doing something and like one of them is like, why are you doing that to the other one? I'm like, she doesn't have to explain herself. She just wants to. And just
Mhm.
wanting to is fine. Like that is enough for you don't have
Mhm.
to have it doesn't have to have a monetary value. It doesn't have to um it doesn't have as long as it's not hurting anybody else. Like
Right.
do what you want. Watch your reality TV, watch, do your like whatever brings you joy. Like just wanting to
Right.
is good. And somehow we were disconnected from that. Probably the
Right.
patriarchy. I always
I
blame everything
mean,
on
I blame a lot of things on the
the
patriarchy as well.
patriarchy.
Yeah, especially I think as we get older, as I don't know. There's so many. I get a lot of comments of like, you're this age. What are you doing next? And most of the time it's in reference to when are you having kids? I'm like, oh,
Mm.
when I hold, please. We're living our life. We're over here. We're doing things, and you don't know what else is going on. And I don't have to explain that to you. That's not my job to explain that to you. You do you.
Hmm.
I'll do me, and that's okay. And we're not hurting anybody. And yeah, this is bringing up a lot of smash the patriarchy vibes now.
Yeah, I always have to bring it up at least once, and I'm like, wait, am I opening that rabbit hole? No, like maybe we go back to the painting.
um,
Listen, if we could just like look at all my podcast episodes and see how many times I've said the word patriarchy, it's a lot.
well, okay, but I think that there's a reason why this image
Yeah,
is of a woman.
right.
And I think that, and I don't know when this painting was created, this art was created, but I think that there's something to be said that it's a woman.
Hmm.
It's not an animal, it's not a man.
Yeah,
It's
and what's she's very like round and like her very um like pleasing shape. But then I was looking at it too, and it's like we've got all of the elements represented. There's sky, there's fire, there's earth,
yeah.
there's air,
Hmm.
there's like plant life and the cosmos and animal life. Like
Right?
it's all even
It's
like
life.
yeah, even like the symbols on her neck and on her head could represent, and even the lotus could
Hmm.
represent like a like spiritual component and her spiritual connection. So it's like it's all in here. Her being a woman in
Hmm.
all of those elements.
Right. And I think that oftentimes it's women that are more explaining
Hmm.
why we do what we do and the choices that we make, and whether we choose to have kids, not have kids, whether we choose to stay home or work part time or work full time with kids. We're constantly having to explain ourselves
Yeah.
for no reason at all, for no reason that we're choosing to do things that previous generations have chosen not to. We'll leave it there.
Yeah.
We'll leave it that nicely. Um, but I think that especially, millennials, Gen Zers, I mean, my friends, we are all questioned for why we do what we do. We're questioned when we hit 30 and we don't have kids yet. And it's why are we constantly getting questioned versus other people getting questioned,
Hmm.
um, and receiving that judgment?
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes that makes us go astray of the things that we're passionate about and the things that we actually want to do, because we feel like our this practical brain has to take over and go, well, this is going to yield me X amount of money. This job I have benefits and this job I don't, and or this job's the benefits better. And so it's we end up doing things we don't love because we are questioned and have to explain, and then we squash our passions
Hmm.
because we feel like we have to live at this expectation of somebody or something else, and that's not as fun.
Yeah.
I found
Well
it very
said.
freeing when I just started living for me. Like,
Yeah.
obviously I consult with my husband. I'm like, hey, I want to do this thing. What do you think about that? And I very much love, and that's why he's my husband, of like, well, do you have a plan for that? I'm like, yeah, this is kind of my thought process behind. And I'm still researching this. Can you help me with this part? He's like, all right, sure. Like, let's do it. Let's go for it. When I open my own office, he's like, okay, go for it. Do you have a plan? Yeah. How much is it gonna cost? Like, how much is it gonna cost?
Yeah.
What are the like what are do you know what you need? Yes. Okay, great. What do you need my help with? And so once I kind of hit that point of like, wow, that's so freeing.
Yeah.
It's so freeing. And that their hard days may still come up and we may need to have emotional support chocolate or something. And but that overall it's like, wow, this is a good life.
Yeah. I was in Santa Fe last week and
I
I
was
love
so jealous.
Oh,
I
it's
was
so
looking at
beautiful
your
there.
pictures and I was like, oh,
Well, and I love to go to like artists painting on the street or artists selling their art on the street or in booths or whatever, and they're out there with their art. And I love to buy art from those people because then I get this art with a
absolutely.
story. And I met this
Yeah.
woman. I don't know how old she was. She was surely in her 80s, maybe her 90s. Like
Mhm.
she was delightful, and she was in a booth. Well, the booth was her daughter selling her fashion designs and her clothes, but there was on this pillar, it said my mom's art and an arrow, and then there's some paintings there, and I was like, oh,
I
this is
love
my
it.
chance. I just beeline to it, and the mom was there, and she was wearing the daughter's fashions. It was so cute. But I was talking to her. I was like, well, how did you start getting into painting? And she just was telling me all her stories, and she's from Austria. And then her mother wouldn't let her go into something creative when she was
Hmm.
younger because she needed to have a real profession so that she wouldn't be
Hmm.
reliant on a man.
Hmm.
And I completely get that because of her generation. Yes,
Yeah.
like we
Yeah.
didn't have the options. And so she kind of squashed that. She became a medical doctor. I think said she was a psychologist.
Wow.
But I think she was an MD. And then when she retired, she started painting, and now she just paints, and she uses egg tempera, and then she sells her paintings in her daughter's booth.
That's
But I was like,
amazing.
yeah, and I was like, oh, that is amazing, but I'm like wondering how much of her life was spent wishing she was
Yeah.
painting. And um
Absolutely.
it made me think of what something you said made me think of that, and now I've lost that thread.
Well, and
But
that makes me think of my mom. So my mom was born in 1950, and so she was a boomer. And I remember her telling me, like, when she was applying for college, I did not apply to SMU myself. My mother sent in my application. I wanted to get the heck out of Texas. That did not happen. There were some things. I ended up at 20 minutes from home. And it honestly ended up being the best choice. And I chose to stay. I chose not to transfer. Um, but she wanted to go to SMU. That
Mhm.
was what she wanted. But she felt so she graduated from high school 1968. And I remember her telling me, she goes, I could be a teacher, I could be a nurse, or I could be a secretary. And those options were the only options given to me. And I felt that it was impractical to go to SMU for music when those were my three options of things that were practical. And so she stayed in Missouri and went to a school that she strongly disliked at first and then ended up transferring back to the city. We're not middle of the nowhere country girls. That's not our thing. That's not our vibe.
Yeah.
We enjoy cities. We like Target being close.
Yep.
Um, but she did her student teaching and never taught another day until she became a substitute when I was in high school. So, 2005. That was and they kept trying to get her to like, come on staff. She's like, absolutely not. I will help you. I will be a sub. I will walk in. I will do the things. I will leave. um, but that wasn't, I mean, she was a great teacher. She,
Yeah.
well, she tried to teach me. We were too similar. And so we would just sit there and fight.
Mhm.
But I mean, her passion was music. She played piano. She taught piano. That's how she supported herself through college.
Yeah.
And if she would have been able to do music, like it's a little painful sometimes that she didn't get this like retirement year. She died a month shy of 60. And so she didn't get
Mm,
that kind of time in which this painter that you met last week got of I mean, she was hustling literally till the day she died.
yeah.
And she decorated people's houses for Christmas, and she did get a lot of joy out of that. But I just always kind of think, I'm like, if you had just been able to do this, how would your life have been different? And I think that's why I kind of take in my, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? What are the things I'm passionate about? And I think that's a lesson I got from her of like, I'm gonna do it. It's not hurting anybody, it's actually helping people. So I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It made me think
Yeah.
too, your story, and so there's all these stats of, and this podcast does have a lot of teacher listeners because it has been for teachers up until today, until you listening to this podcast. It's still for
So
teachers
right now,
until this very second.
it's for
Um,
everybody.
it's not for everybody, but teachers also will love this. Our teachers will also still love this. But there's a dramatic thing happening in education even before COVID,
Mhm.
where the stats of people entering teacher training programs
Yeah,
is going down like crazy, and
absolutely.
then um, and then COVID, of course, has caused a lot of drama in the schools, and so there's the addition of the environments being more toxic, the students being behind behaviorally and emotionally, and they're dealing with all of that. And so teachers are really stressed out. And a lot of teachers, especially the ones that have been teaching for a really long time, are like, I need to do something else. I can't do this anymore. So there's all
Hmm.
these teachers leaving the classroom, less teachers coming in. And I always blamed it for, about like the education system is harder to get, is so I want to say it's there's so much toxicity in it. I don't want to call it toxic, but
Hmm.
I always blame that. But I started to think as you were talking, I'm like, oh, it's also women have more options now. Women are the
Yeah.
main, and women are teachers are mostly women. As
Well,
women are like doing other things, they're not
and
entering the
they're
classroom.
right, and they're going to professions in which they're valued
Yeah,
or perceived to be more valued. Because traditionally my husband's a teacher, but so
yeah,
he's in the minority of being a male teacher. But
right.
I think that because being a teacher has been a mostly female dominated field, it's been less respected.
Hmm.
And women are choosing to go into things that hopefully they're following passions that they have, but that they they're being respected more for what they do.
Hmm.
And I also know of teachers that have left the classroom that miss it terribly.
Yeah,
They wish they could be with the students because they were on this meant to be on this earth to be with students and with kids, and it's painful for them to not be in that classroom anymore, but they had to step off the the wheel
yeah.
because of their own mental health.
Yeah. Yeah, I just had a conversation with a woman last week. She's like, I've been teaching for 20 something years. And if I could teach the way I used to, if I could teach, and she's like, I don't get
Right.
to do that anymore. I don't have the choice. I don't, it's just all the other things. Um,
Honest, they work so hard. We love
yeah,
teachers. They work so hard. I
they
mean,
do.
I see my husband during COVID, and he was the virtual teacher. He would be at school all day because he taught virtually from his classroom. And then he would come home and he would be doing lessons for the next day till 1 a.m.
Hmm.
And he would get up and go do it again with minimal complaint. There were days that he was like, like, what is going on? But honestly, like for his kids, he's like, I will do this. He
Yeah.
like they want to be in the classroom. They want to be with kids and to help them and to watch them grow.
Yeah.
And it's been so sad
Yeah.
to watch.
Indeed. Okay. So let's pull it back to the painting because
Yes,
isn't
we
this
have gone on
amazing
all the
though?
tangents.
Like, yeah, that is what I absolutely love about looking at a work of art and talking about it is it just opens us up to so many thoughts and ideas. And it also made me
Yeah.
think this is another tangent, which I don't want to go on. I want to bring it back to the painting, but this artist, like, this is a contemporary artist. And I didn't look at the date. This was from Instagram. So it's probably in the last couple of years. But she has a business about grief and art, and she uses art to help people with grief.
Wow. I
So,
love that.
like she gets to, women get to do these things that really bring them up. She gets to paint, she gets to help people, she gets to combine all of her self um, into her work.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's pull it back into the painting. I think um, now looking at your life and your work about grief, what connections can you find in this artwork that
Oof.
remind you of that?
Oof. Well, the first thing I mentioned earlier, like the thread, the
Hmm.
string that you follow, that was my first kind of connection with that book and themes that I talk about with my kids a lot. The second was the butterflies.
Mm,
And I like that each of these butterflies are different. So the symbol for National Child Grief Awareness Month, that is the month of November, and that National Child Grief Awareness Day is on the third Thursday of November. So it's just the week before Thanksgiving. The symbol is a butterfly, and an activity that we do often with kids during that month that many grief therapists and those that work with children who are grieving do is like, let's decorate this butterfly. You
hmm.
can decorate it however you want to. You can choose to have it be indicative of your grief and your grief journey. You can do it with things that remind you of your person who died. However, you want to decorate this butterfly. So I love that each of these butterflies are different because for me, it's like here are all these different stories. The shape is that like it's all a butterfly. It's all grief. All the stories are different. The colors are different. The details are different. And so that was for me, that's a big tie into grief. I also my mom's in my thing. So I danced and was on in a dance company for a while and then moved to drill team for a little bit. And one thing my mom always wrote in the, you had to buy ads for all the
Yep.
programs and things like that. It's all of that. And so my mom in all of the ads, she would write, your stars are watching you tonight. And that was kind of our thing of like,
Oh,
dad is here. And then when my grandmother died, it was like, dad, that's dad and Grammy. And so that's actually why my logo for my office, Talamantez
mm,
Therapy, has a star. Because for me, like butterflies are grief for a lot of people, but for me, it's more of the stars. And many can choose to think that the stars, I mean, the Lion King, the
yeah.
stars are all the kings that have come before us and have died. But for me, grief is stars. I look at the stars to feel connected to my people. Many, if you believe in heaven and the concept of heaven, you look up to the heavens and that connects you to your people. And so I actually have a painting that I did in my office of I want to make it bigger to like put above my couch, but now I have kid art above my couch and I love
Oh,
that more. So I have this little painting over in the corner of my room that has like clouds and there's three stars in the clouds. And so
mm,
it's very ethereal, all blues and whites. And so stars are really big for me in grief. And so those are the couple things that I was drawn to specifically when it comes to this piece and grief for me, whether it's working with my kids or myself. Um, but then it's also for a long time, and sometimes even still, I feel like isolated, like this woman is.
yeah.
After my mom died, it was just me. I wasn't married. I was dating my husband, and he and his family have always been very supportive. But I had no parents, I had no grandparents, I have no siblings.
Mm,
I have extended family. I have family or friends that have become my family. But there are times when I'm feeling in the depths of life that I'm like, I am by myself. I am isolated. Um, so this woman in this piece kind of standing alone. I mean, she doesn't look unhappy, but she doesn't look happy. She's not
right.
standing there with a smile on her face. I mean, you can kind of tell in her eyes that she's seen some stuff.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's hard to not feel like this isolated person dealing with all this around us. So she's got the butterflies around her that for me represent grief, the stars wrapped around her
Mm,
that for me represent grief. And then it's just this single person with this passion and idea. And it's hard for me to like not see myself in her,
yeah.
which is not a bad thing. But I really have to work hard at times that are hard November, like the start of November through the end of the year is like a grief roller coaster for me. My mom died November 14th. Thanksgiving's the next week. My dad's birthday is December 5th. Then we have Christmas. My mom's birthday is December 28th.
Oh,
So
wow.
like the end of the year can be very up and down. And I never, with grief, you never quite know how you're going to feel. This will be the 12th year anniversary of my mom dying. My dad died 22 years ago. You never know how it's going to hit you. I had a panic attack in the middle of North Park buying Christmas gifts on December 6th, like 4 years ago. And he had been
Mm.
dead at that point, 16 or 17, 18 years. But there were all the circumstances, the stars aligned for me to like have this grief burst in this panic attack in the middle of North Park. And you just never know how it's going to hit you, and it's hard. I Something I have been working on with my own therapist is I have to reach out and not be this isolated person when things are hard. And it's good to sit in our own stuff and to feel it and to feel our feelings, but at some point we need other people that we trust to bring us back to the group, to not have us be isolated. I am very lucky that my inner circle of humans knows that the end of the year is kind of rough. It
Hmm.
has ups and downs. And so they'll check in and be like, how are we doing today? What's going on? Do I need to bring you back? Like what's going on? And so my hope for her in this painting is that she finds those people that help bring her back and help her feel less isolated.
Oh, that's beautiful. I have a question about that.
Yeah.
But I have a comment that I want to bring it back to the painting real quick before I get to the question. And I'm telling you this so you'll remind me that I do have the
Yes.
question because I don't want to
Yes.
forget. But I noticed as you were talking, I was kind of looking at the painting as you were talking, and I noticed this entire time I have not been looking at her face. And then you brought up her face.
Interesting.
And
Hmm.
then and now I'm like I was forcing myself to look at her face, and it doesn't feel good like in
No.
my body to look at her face. Like it feel like she does definitely does not look happy. Like you can see like this sort of vacantness to her,
Mm-hmm.
this sort of like trapped in her own pain type of look.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just looking at the rest, you're like, oh, she's a part of the universe, and
Yeah.
the plants are coming up and being a part of her, and she's connected, and the thread. But then you look at her face, and it's like it's a completely different vibe. And
Yeah.
like it's interesting that I have been doing everything in my power to avoid looking at her face, when usually the face is the first thing you're looking at. That's the one
Right.
thing you focus on. But I have been like avoiding it.
Right.
Um,
And I think that, I mean, artists, I think, do that for a reason. Like there are ways
mhm,
that I I don't do a whole lot of like modern art study. Most of my art study has been like classical, Baroque, Renaissance, Impressionist, things like that. And oftentimes they're very like, look at this thing. I have put
mhm,
the sky is open right here, and I want you to look at this thing. And for us in this work of art, I think it's the look at this thing is the white flower at her chest and
mhm.
the pink one in front of her. And but the face is in line with those. And so we have
Yeah.
this really big flower, like in the middle, but a little lower than the middle. Then we have this white flower. Then we have this half lotus situation going on at her throat. And then it's her face.
Hmm. And then there's the thing on her
And
forehead,
then
and
there's a
then
thing on her
right
forehead.
above that,
Yeah.
there's the galaxy. So
Right.
there's like a vertical line going through, and it's
Hmm.
like it's like our eyes going up through that line, and then it goes back through the swirl. It's like all these curvy
Hmm.
lines are bringing our eye all the way around. It's just like a fleeting passing thing through her face.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
noticed that while you were talking, but my question, and I
Yeah.
remembered it, so I'm proud of myself for doing that.
Look at you.
Okay. It's a problem. Um, so the question was, you were talking about your isolation, and
Hmm.
I have a friend whose mother died when she was 12, and she talks about that too. That even though she had siblings, even though her father was still alive, like
Hmm.
she felt like just completely alone and
Yeah.
in it. Like her dad had like didn't parent her very because he was in his own grief too, and
Right.
so how. how can we, people that are supporting loved ones going through such a thing, um, how can we help? Like, what can we do for our loved ones who are struggling?
Absolutely. So I think it's the first thing that's most important to kind of keep in mind when you're helping people who are grieving is that not every person in that family system is going to grieve the same.
Yeah.
They are all going to grieve differently. I don't care if it's twins that have had someone die. Everyone is going to grieve differently in their own way. They all have their own personalities. They all have their own relationship with the person who died. They all have different developmental stages. They all have their own stuff. And so that's the first thing to kind of keep in mind. The second thing is I like specific help. Sometimes it's I need some chocolate. I may or may not chocolate my feelings a lot, but that's okay. I honor it and I
That's fine.
recognize it. It's something
Yeah,
that helps for me and we love a good dopamine hit.
indeed.
Um, but specific help is really helpful. Hey, I'm on my way to your house. Would you like to leave your laundry at the front door for me to wash and bring back to you? Would you like me to hang out for a bit? I can do your dishes while you go relax. Would you like to talk? But I have time today between 2 and 4. How can I be of best help to you? So I think specific help is really important. It's really also I like having different friends that do different things. I know the person that I talk to when I'm like, oof, these are the big feelings, and I just need to tell you about the big feelings because I know you can handle the big feelings. I do ask permission of like, are you in a headspace in which I can have the feelings? And if not, then
Yeah.
I honor that for that person and then divert. But we have the people that we can talk to about the tough stuff. Then we also have the people that are like, we're going out. I'm picking you up at 7. We can go to whatever restaurant you want, but put on some pants, brush your hair, and get in my car at 7. And so having friends that and people who support you that are like, let's go have some fun. Let's distract you for a bit. The people who help with care tasks, dishes, laundry, cooking, um, do things other than lasagna. People, I literally, after my dad died, couldn't eat lasagna again until high school. There are more options. But I also know that that's really easy. Um, and then there are the people that help you lean into your feelings and look at them. And I have a lot of please don't say this phrases. Please don't say I know how you feel.
Yeah.
Please don't say this happened for a reason.
Mm.
I as an adult will literally cuss you out if you look at me and say that.
Yeah.
Um, I don't like they're in a better place can go either way. Some people find comfort in that. Some people, especially kids, are going to look at you and go, isn't the better place here with me? So just be, that's a more cautionary one. I typically
Mm.
don't use that. I steer clear of that one, but there are people that do find comfort in that one. Um, so I have a lot of don't phrases, but I love when people bring my parents up in conversation. My husband got to meet my mom, and so I'll look at him and be like, I'm being a very Debbie person today. And he's like, yeah, you are. Like this is she was all over the place and would come in and like be a kind of a hurricane, do all the things and like leave. And then so I like that he and I can talk about her. I appreciate it when my cousins talk about my parents. Because there are so many stories because they're 8 and 6 years older than me. And I was 9 when my dad died. He was sick my whole life. I was 8 when he went in the hospital. And so there are so many things that I didn't know about him before he got sick. So I love it when my family talks about them. That and so don't be afraid to talk about the person. If tears come up for the person who's grieving, maybe those tears just needed to come out.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with tears coming out. It's better than them staying in. And
Yeah.
so sitting with them in that moment, ask about their person. Hey, how's your grief feel today? What's this like for you? And it's okay for them to be okay. Like I was running down some feelings with a kid yesterday and they were like, okay, well, I've been mad, sad, happy, bored, and okay. I'm like, all right, cool. Tell me more about that. Like, don't judge them for like, you shouldn't feel happy. I mean, yes, you're allowed to feel happy. It's fine.
Yeah.
So great. You feel okay today. What do you want to do? What do you want to talk about? So
Oh gosh,
a
so many
very
great tips
long-winded
in
answer
there.
for you.
That was so good. I think what you were saying about, not being afraid to talk about the loved one who's passed, like that, I think a lot of people feel like they don't want to bring it up because they don't want to bring up the sad emotions or whatever. But then,
Right.
everyone I've talked to is usually like, no, I want to talk about them. It keeps them all,
Absolutely.
keeps them here with me. And um,
Absolutely. I
yeah,
want to tell you about my mom's Lucy and Ethel escapades and the trouble we would get in. And it's just very funny because we lived a
yeah.
very funny life. Because at some point, with all the things that she and I went through together, we just had to start laughing at some of it. And we're just like, well,
Yeah.
here we are. And how are we going to navigate this one?
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So I think we're probably at a good time thing. So, but I want to see if there anything left in this painting that you feel is unsaid and something that you are continuing to notice that you haven't that you really want to talk about.
I think we've kind of talked through. I'm glad we ended up talking about her face
Yeah.
because it did take me a while to get to her face, but we got there. Um, I just think this is a beautiful piece. And so I'm super glad that you found this one and brought it to my attention, and I'm going to go research this person.
Yeah. Yeah. She's got a lot of good grief art on
Yeah.
her Instagram. And her for you and everyone listening, the Instagram is grief and art. Just no dots or lines or just those words put together. And the artist name is Linda McCabe. And then this painting, I believe, is called "There Is a Thread You Follow." And but she has one about the stages of grief that has the butterfly going through the cocoon. Once you mentioned the butterfly, oh yeah, there are butterflies all over. Hummingbirds are also in her art a lot as well. But some really great work on there, and we will also let her know that we talked about her painting on the podcast, so she
Yes.
can be aware that we really enjoyed her artwork today.
Yes.
Awesome. So let's see. I think we're good. So thank you so much for talking about this
Absolutely.
artwork with me today.
Thanks for picking a great piece and for allowing me to come spend some time talking about art. It's not something I get to do very much anymore. And so that was really fun.
Wonderful.
Now I
Okay.
need to go to the museum and just
Yes.
go wander.
And remind people again, just in case they forgot, what's the name of your podcast and how can listeners connect with you
Yeah, so
online?
the name of the podcast is What the Feels, and you can follow us on Instagram at What the Feels Podcast. No punctuation, just straight through. The podcast is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. There we go. You can also follow my office Instagram at Talamantez Therapy. Again, no punctuation, just straight through, and that's Talamantez Therapy. And yeah, you can connect with me on there. I think I have a Facebook page for my office as well. So I'm on the line in
Awesome.
different places. So
Perfect. And we will
yeah,
link all of those in our show notes. And beautiful. Thank you so much.
thank you so much.
Okay, that was our first episode of the new Art and Self podcast. And I loved it. I love talking about art. I love what it brings up in us and the connections we can find. And it's a beautiful process. So if you are interested in being on the podcast, if you have something you're passionate about and you want to talk it through, I would love to pick an artwork for us to discuss together. Also, if you know of someone who might be interested in this podcast, share it with them. So my email is cindy@artclasscurator.com. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for listening to Art and Self. And if you loved what you heard, please consider leaving me a rating or a review on iTunes. And share this episode with one friend who you know needs to hear what we talked about today. You will find links to the artworks that we discuss over at the show notes, and you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Cindy Needs Art. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful week. I'll see you next time.